All right, so we're back. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the void and some concepts associated with the void. So one of the things that, so when I was a young man and I worked in St. Louis, Missouri, and had a mentor by the name of Leon Sharp. You should go to his website. Great man, great man. And I was at a position in my life that I wanted to challenge everything, right? And so one of the things, so there was a situation where we were working with a group, and at that particular time I wasn't particularly religious, and really fought against religion as a way of thinking and moving, and since that time I have been delivered from that. But Leon said something that was very interesting to me, because we were working with this community group, and they were doing all these, they had all these religious practices that they were trying to infuse in the program and in the process we were engaged in. And I said, Leon, we should tell them the truth. Let's tell them the truth, because all this stuff that they're talking about is not helpful. It's not blah, blah, blah. He said, you know what? I said, you know what, Leon? I'm going to tell them. I'm going to tell them the truth. And Leon said, whoa, young man. He said, stop. He said, because you're about to break a cosmic law. And I was like, a cosmic law? I said, what are you talking about? He said, Andre, I want you to remember this for the rest of your life. You cannot take something away from someone unless you have something to replace it with. And he said, if you don't have anything to replace their religious fervor with, if you don't have anything to replace their hope with, if you don't have anything to replace their motivation with, don't take it away from them. So I took that to heart. And so what I understand is, if there is a hole or a void in someone's life, it will be filled by something. Just imagine a pothole, right? So I'm sure you've lived in a place where there have been potholes, and when a pothole kind of opens itself up, what could you find in a pothole? You might find trash, debris, cans, gum wrappers, cigarettes, all sorts of things in that hole. But what is supposed to be in the hole? Cement or asphalt, or whatever the combination of ingredients are to make that a drivable pathway. And so what we understand in the universe is, if there is a hole, it will be filled by something. Either things by your design or things that just kind of fall into it. I don't know. So my uncle quit smoking, and you never found my uncle without a toothpick. And I always marveled at the numbers of toothpicks he would have, or the consistency that he had with those toothpicks, until I understood that he used those toothpicks to substitute the cigarettes that he used to carry on him. And so we have to understand, if there's a hole or a void, that it will be filled by something. And so when we talk about this void in terms of humanity, the part of us, the missing piece, if you will, of what we think is our humanity, this missing piece, this void, we know that it can only be filled with the completion of the relationship between the healthy body and the healthy spirit. That relationship can fill that void. However, there are other things that are competing for that. And so one of those things is this concept of consumerism. Right? So consumerism plays a role in that. And it shows up, consumerism, commercialism, hoarding is one of those ways that people try to fill the hole in their void. fill the hole in their soul is by hoarding. Oftentimes we seek the approval of others, so we seek for friends, family. I think Facebook has really been an interesting social tool to actually analyze how people interact or the needs that people have. And the things that people post on Facebook is just absolutely incredible because they have a need to be filled. And we call people friends who aren't our friends because they help us to kind of fill this void. We end up, to fill that void, we end up with things that are conscious and unconscious habits. Overeating, undereating, smoking, over-exercising, under-exercising. And Alfred Adler referred to those things as neuroses, that in the effort to fill this void, between filling the void and the absence of that void, we have what Alfred Adler would refer to as neuroses. We also look to fill that void. We look for purpose or non-purpose. And so, and I tell the young people that I work with, there's two ways to find out about your purpose. One is to ask what your purpose is, and the other is to define what your purpose is. But in order to help us fill that void, we'll look for a sense of purpose. Why do young, intelligent young men join gangs that may not necessarily have their best interests at heart? It's because they're looking for a sense of purpose. And if I can sell you on a sense of purpose, you certainly will join and do most things that I ask you to do. And then we have this concept of compensation. So we try to compensate, and sometimes we overcompensate for our inabilities to do certain things or our inadequacies. And so we internalize those misconceptions, and sometimes we externalize those misconceptions, and that's typically when we are overcompensating for our frailty. So there's that. So I want to talk a little bit about this, and that compensation leads back to this concept of inferiority. So if I can't be God, going back to the God complex, I will settle for being your God, which means that I am recognizing my inferiority as a human being. Now, do we like being inferior? No, because we want to be in control of our lives, of our destinies, of the things around us. If we can control the weather, we would control the weather, right? Because we want to be in control. And so, however, no matter how much we want to be in control, our inferiority consistently comes up to remind us that we're not God and we can't be God. And so, this inferiority shows up in two ways. There is self-disclosure of our inferiority. And so that's when I say, I recognize that I am inferior in some ways. One of the things that I thought was very interesting, our pastor was talking about people who come up for prayer. They have an ailment or something's not functioning in their body correctly, so they come up for prayer and they want some relief from that. Well, he told the congregation just last week, he said, God is not going to heal you from getting old. So some of this self-disclosure around this inferiority, we have to recognize that our inferiority, some of that stuff is just going to happen. Right? And that it's not, the universe isn't being personal in its revealing of your inferiority. And so self-disclosure says, you know what, I'll work on it, and I may do it on my terms, but I do recognize that I'm inferior. And inferiority can show up when you're self-disclosing your inferiority, it can show up in two ways, right? So you work on it on your own terms as opposed to being forced to work on it, and it can lead to more self-awareness, right? Or in some ways, it can lead to self-shame and self-protection. It's that you say, you know what, I understand that I'm inferior, and I want to work on it, and I want to make that better so I get more self-awareness. Or you can become a self-protectionist where you say, you know what, my inferiority, I admit it, but I don't want to change. I don't want to adapt, or I want to protect myself from ever feeling that way again or ever recognizing my inferiority. That's when we do our self-disclosure. The void also, or this inferiority also gets exposed, can be exposed openly. And when it's exposed openly, we are then forced to, so there's an old adage that what's done in the dark will come to the light. And so this open exposure, this inferiority, when it's openly exposed, is when everybody knows and everybody sees what your dysfunction is because you weren't willing to self-disclose, right? And so this is typically where people will use the term, I've hit rock bottom, or the bottom has fallen out. I've gone as far down as I can go to suppress my inferiority, but now I'm so low that everybody knows about my inferiority. And so now, instead of self-disclosing and working on it on our own terms, we now have to work on it publicly. And so for some folks, that's helpful. So going to AA meetings, going to support groups, going to groups where you have to surround yourself publicly with people who can help you deal with your inferiority. It is work. It works for folks, right? So this open exposure does not necessarily have to be a negative thing, but it is something that we have to recognize in terms of dealing with inferiority. And so there's a spectrum of responses. When people are forced into this open exposure of their inferiority, and it is public, there's a spectrum of behavior from defensiveness to being aggressive that people use as responses to this inferiority. And so one of the things that we try to do with this inferiority is that we typically overcompensate for our inferiority. And I would suggest to you that bigotry, and prejudice are overcompensations for inferiority complexes, right? That the baseline of bigotry is an inferiority complex. That the baseline for prejudice is an inferiority complex. And so I would rather oppress, suppress other folks so that I feel better about myself and don't get it exposed because I don't feel good about who I am. And so when we talk about these particular things, words that come into mind for me are words like sexism, racism, ableism, not believing that people with disabilities should have the right or are as capable as anyone else, heterosexism, I would even go as far as looksism, that if you don't look the model type, whatever the model type is for your nation state, that you don't deserve all the rights and benefits. And so this inferiority becomes pretty powerful when we start talking about its effects in these particular ways. And so so that void that the free market says it can sell us. Now, here's the interesting thing. Inferiority is so tricky because whether it's self-disclosure or it's being forced by being open, the more I try to, the less I deal with this inferiority, the greater the inferiority grows. The more I feel like I need to compensate for that, right? And so you'll even have people who are victims in these particular systems, in these isms, who perpetrate the same ism that they have been a victim of to the same group. Or you'll have intergroup, because people want to be those crabs in a bucket that never get out, right? And so bigotry and prejudice are inferiority complexes gone awry, and they set the stage for sexism, racism, ableism, heterosexism, lookism, and many other isms that our culture has to deal with. And so we'll stop right there. We'll come back. I want to talk a little bit more about cultural competence. I want to get into what Alfred Adler says about the unified individual, and then we'll get back into some more pieces of the book. All right, so here we go.